Did you ever imagine that one single moment inside Buckingham Palace could quietly change the monarchy forever? Because something unimaginable has just happened. And no, it didn't arrive with trumpets, flashing cameras, or royal pageantry. It arrived the way real heartbreak always does, quietly, suddenly, and without mercy. Something inside those ancient walls cracked, and the world felt it. Stay with me, because what unfolded behind those gates isn't just a royal story, it's a human one, and by the end, I promise it will hit you differently. And hey, if you're already feeling that knot in your chest, just tap subscribe now so you don't miss the next chapter of this story. You'll thank yourself later. The morning started like every other royal morning. Soft light spilling over stone courtyards, guards shifting quietly, staff moving with practiced precision, the kind of calm that feels permanent. But something was wrong. Not loud wrong, not dramatic wrong, subtle wrong. Phones rang too early, doors closed too quickly, meetings vanished from calendars without explanation. Senior aides walked faster than usual, eyes forward, expressions tight. Conversations stopped mid-sentence when someone passed. It felt like the palace itself was holding its breath. By mid-morning, that uneasy feeling had turned heavy. You know that moment when you walk into a room and instantly know something bad has happened, even before anyone speaks? That. Emails weren't trusted anymore. Messages were delivered face to face. The communications team disappeared behind locked doors. Even long-time staff avoided eye contact. Outside the gates, reporters noticed it too. Security vehicles arriving in clusters, guards repositioned without comment, side entrances suddenly used, no smiles, no explanations. Something serious had happened. Something big. By noon, the whispers reached the press. Not facts, not details, just fragments. Significant development, deeply troubling, unprecedented. And that's when the rumors exploded. Social media did what social media always does. It panicked in every possible direction at once. Wild theories, emotional posts, total chaos. Even veteran royal correspondents admitted it. They had no idea what was happening. Then, without warning, the royal website went offline. And when it came back, everything changed. Black text, white background, the royal crest. No dramatic headline, no explanation, just a sentence heavy enough to stop a nation. A deeply distressing and heartbreaking development has occurred within the royal family. That was it. No names, no cause, no comfort, just grief. People froze mid-scroll, mid-conversation, mid-breath. TV programs cut into live broadcasts. Anchors spoke softly, carefully, like every word might break something fragile. Phones buzzed in classrooms, offices, cafes. Conversations stopped. People stared at screens in silence. Crowds began forming at the palace gates almost instinctively. Nobody told them to go. They just went. And suddenly, Buckingham Palace didn't feel like a symbol anymore. It felt like a house in mourning. Inside, staff described a silence so thick it felt physical. Corridors stretched endlessly. Footsteps echoed too loudly. Some staff were quietly sent home. Others were told to remain in place without explanation. Veterans of the palace, people who had lived through decades of royal crises, said they had never felt anything like this. By evening, the world had caught up. Washington, Sydney, Paris, Tokyo. Every headline said the same thing in different words: tragedy in the palace. And yet, no one knew the full truth, only that something had broken and it would never be repaired the same way.
If you're still with me right now, drop a quick like, not for me, for the story, because stories like this deserve to be remembered. Outside the gates, mourning began without instruction. Flowers, candles, photos, letters. Some people came with bouquets, some with nothing but tears, some just stood there, unsure what to do with their hands. A little girl placed a single rose on the ground while her mother quietly cried beside her. Elderly couples held hands, eyes fixed at the palace windows, as if waiting for reassurance that would never come. Cameras clicked softly, reporters whispered, no one wanted to speak too loudly, as if grief itself might shatter. Then the bells began. Not ordered, not planned, just instinct. From cathedrals to tiny village chapels, bells rang across Britain. Their echoes rolled through cities and fields alike. People stepped outside their homes just to listen. And in that sound, something ancient and human connected everyone at once. Social media became a digital memorial. Hashtags trended globally in minutes. Messages poured in from every continent. Prayers, memories, photos, simple words like, "I can't believe it." Public figures joined ordinary citizens, presidents, actors, teachers, teenagers. For once, nobody cared about status, only sorrow. As night fell, candles flickered in the cold wind, wax pooled on stone, flowers covered the pavement in layers of color and grief. And inside the palace, everything was worse. Advisors walked slowly, voices barely rose above whispers. Even the guards, trained to remain expressionless, looked heavy with mourning. An emergency meeting was held in a private chamber beneath chandeliers that suddenly felt too cold, too bright. The king sat at the head of the table, silent, not regal, not commanding, just broken. Queen Camilla sat beside him, her hand gently resting on his arm. No speeches, no strength to offer. When the meeting ended, no one moved. No one knew what to say. Because what do you say when loss strips everything away? William and Kate moved quietly through the palace that day. William, raised inside those walls, looked like a man whose foundation had been pulled from under beneath him. Kate stayed close, steady, silent, strong in the way only people who love deeply can. They were seen briefly at a window, silhouettes against fading light, both staring into the distance, not as royals, as two people trying to survive a moment they never imagined. Meals went untouched, clocks sounded too loud, time felt frozen, and when night came, the lights at the palace dimmed one by one. Buckingham Palace, once a fortress of ceremony, became something entirely else, a home in mourning. For William, this wasn't just another royal test, this was personal. In the weeks before the announcement, people had noticed it, the quieter voice, the strained smiles, the reduced appearances. He still showed up, he always does, but something inside him was cracking. When the news broke, he reportedly spent hours alone in his study, staring over the gardens where his children played. Phone buzzing, messages piling up. He answered none, because sometimes even future kings need silence. When he finally appeared beside Kate, the nation saw it immediately. Red eyes, pale face, no rehearsed smile. This wasn't the heir. This was a man barely holding himself together. Kate's hand brushed him quietly, a reminder, a lifeline. He thanked the public, paused, struggled.
And when he asked for privacy, it didn't sound royal. It sounded like a father, like a husband, like a human being. Afterward, they withdrew completely, because protecting children matters more than cameras, because grief doesn't care about crowns. And if you've ever lost someone, you know exactly what that silence feels like. Comment if you felt that moment too.
I'm reading every single one." Then came the king's decision. He had to speak, not as a monarch, but as a man. Drafts were written, scrapped, rewritten. Nothing felt right. Because how do you speak for a nation when your own heart is shattered? When the cameras finally rolled, he sat alone at a desk, dressed in black, hands clasped, eyes heavy. And when he spoke, his voice wasn't royal, it was fragile. "We are all, in the end, human." That line alone changed everything. Living rooms fell silent, pubs paused, hospitals stopped. The monarchy had dropped its armor. For the first time in generations, the crown felt human. No applause followed, only reflection, only tears, only understanding. And in that moment, Britain didn't see a king, it saw a father. Slowly, pieces of the truth emerged. Not scandal, not politics, not betrayal, just loss. A deeply personal loss, the kind no title can protect you from. And suddenly, the story shifted. People stopped speculating. They started empathizing, because grief doesn't need details to be understood. Across Britain, vigils burned through the night. Candles, hymns, letters, toys, ribbons, strangers hugged. Volunteers brought blankets. Churches opened their doors. People of every belief sat together in silence, not for monarchy, for humanity. And something strange happened. Critics mourned beside loyalists. Young stood beside old. For once, nobody argued. Everyone simply felt. Days passed. The palace remained quiet. The future felt uncertain. But one truth settled deeply into the nation. Crowns may symbolize power, but beneath them beat hearts that break just like ours. And that changes everything. So now Britain waits, not for tradition, not for ceremony, but for healing. Because something has shifted. The monarchy no longer feels distant, it feels human, fragile, real. And maybe, just maybe, that's where its future truly begins. If this story touched you, please share your thoughts below. I really mean that. I want to hear what you felt reading this. Like the video if it moved you. Subscribe if you want more stories told honestly. And remember, even the mightiest families are not beyond heartbreak. Thank you for staying with me. Thank you for feeling this story.
loss has broken. The world will be watching, and so will history. If this story moved you, beauty and endurance, but this moment revealed something far deeper, the fragile humanity beneath the crown. Continue to stir hearts across the world. The story of the royal family has always been one of had revealed something. It had spent centuries guarding its humanity, yet the pain etched across the royal family
And yet the silence that followed was somehow louder than everything before it. Because grief doesn't end when the cameras turn off. It lingers. It sits in empty chairs. It waits in unanswered messages. It lives in rooms that suddenly feel too big. Inside Buckingham Palace, time moved differently. Staff returned to routine because routine is all humans know how to cling to when reality feels unbearable. But every footstep echoed, every door closing felt heavier, every hallway seemed longer than it used to be. Even the air felt different. People who had worked there for decades said the palace no longer felt like a place of duty. It felt like a home after a funeral, tidy on the surface, shattered underneath. And outside the gates, the crowds never truly left. They changed shifts. Some came before work, some after. Some stayed all night, wrapped in coats, hands around warm cups, just standing there, not talking, not moving, just being present. Because sometimes presence is the only thing grief allows. Letters continued to appear, handwritten notes from children, from grandparents, from strangers who had never met a royal in their life but somehow felt connected to this pain. I don't know why this hurts so much. I feel like I lost a part of my own family. Please tell them they're not alone. That's what people were writing. Not about crowns, not about protocol, about family. And if you think about it, that might be the most powerful thing this tragedy revealed. The monarchy didn't lose its authority, it gained something else, vulnerability. And vulnerability changes everything. Prince William remained out of sight for days, no statements, no appearances, just absence. And absence sometimes speaks louder than any speech. Those close to him said he spent most of his time with his children, reading, walking, sitting quietly, trying to protect their small world from the storm outside. Because imagine being a child and seeing your parents' pain for the first time. Imagine realizing that even kings and queens cry behind closed doors. That lesson stays with you forever. Kate, quietly strong, held everything together the way she always does, not with speeches, not with drama, just with presence, with patience, with love. And somewhere inside that palace, William, the boy who once walked behind his mother's coffin, now stood again inside a chapter he never wanted to repeat. History doesn't ask permission, it just happens. And when it does, it leaves marks. The king returned to his desk not because he was ready, but because the nation needed him. That's the curse of leadership. You don't get to pause, you don't get to collapse, you carry your pain quietly so others can breathe. And yet those who saw him said something had changed. His walk was slower, his eyes softer, his voice gentler. He was still king, but now he was something else too, a man who had learnt how fragile love truly is. Newspapers began shifting their tone, less speculation, more reflection, more humanity. Headlines stopped asking what happened and started asking what now, and that question sat heavy, because the monarchy had always represented permanence, stability, continuity. But grief had reminded everyone that nothing is truly permanent, not even crowns, not even traditions carved into centuries of stone. Only love lasts, and even love leaves scars. In homes across Britain, conversations changed. Parents spoke to children about loss. Grandparents told stories about past moments of national mourning. Young people who had never felt connected to royalty suddenly felt connected to grief. And grief doesn't care about titles, it only cares about hearts. One night, as rain fell softly over London, the palace gates reflected candlelight like stars on stone. Someone placed a letter near the center of the memorial. It simply said, "Thank you for reminding us that you are human." That letter didn't go viral, it didn't trend, but it captured everything. Because in a world obsessed with perfection, the monarchy had shown imperfection, and that made it real. Now, here's the part that stays with me. Not the ceremonies, not the speeches, not the headlines. It's the image of that little girl placing a rose. It's the elderly couple holding hands. It's the strangers hugging. It's the silence that spoke louder than any trumpet. It's the realization that behind every crown is someone who loves, loses, and breaks just like we do. And if that doesn't change how you see power, I don't know what will. So where does this leave the monarchy? Not stronger, not weaker, but different, more human, more fragile, more honest. And maybe that's exactly what the future needed, because institutions survive through tradition, but they are remembered through humanity. If you're still here with me, seriously, thank you. Type one word in the comments that describes how this story made you feel. Just one word. I want to see them. And if you haven't already, hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who understands that sometimes the biggest stories aren't about power, they're about people. Because tonight, Buckingham Palace isn't just a palace, it's a reminder that even the mightiest walls cannot protect the heart. Thank you for listening, thank you for feeling, and thank you for staying until the end.